Hey everyone, welcome back to the Collector's Compass, the official podcast of Collectors MD, where we explore the intersection of collecting, mental wellness, and responsible engagement across every corner of collecting. I'm your host, Alyx Efron, founder of Collectors MD, and today's guest brings a story that expands the definition of what collecting even means. Hyde, better known as Chinchilla Major, has become one of the most active and deeply respected voices inside our Collectors MD community. They join our weekly meetings, our unbox sessions, and consistently show up with honesty, reflection, vulnerability, and courage. What makes this conversation especially important is that Hyde doesn't come from the traditional sports card world. Their collecting journey lives inside fandom spaces like TCG, anime, cosplay, comics, and subculture communities where identity, belonging, and emotional connection are tightly intertwined. This episode isn't about spectacle, it's about awareness. It's about what happens when passion quietly becomes pressure, when collecting becomes escape, and when the courage to step back feels both terrifying and necessary. We'll explore Hyde's journey through fandom, overextension, boundaries, withdrawal, grief, and the slow rebuilding of intention. Hyde, I'm incredibly grateful to have you here. Welcome to the Collector's Compass.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. It's amazing that we are bringing on members from our community to have these much needed conversations. And so I wanted to start by having you shed some light on the subcultures that you're immersed in. Many of our listeners and community members are most familiar with mainstream collecting spaces like sports cards, TCG, sneakers, and memorabilia. So I'd love for you to help us understand the context and meaning behind some of these more niche worlds.
Okay, to start with, I guess I would best clarify myself as a collector of cartoon memorabilia, and that's from a wide swath of decades. Like I got started in the 80s and moved on up to other cartoons in pretty much every stage of my life, really.
What about like the cosplay and like sort of
Yes, that's
coming into
that's
like
been
character?
yes. I'm so glad there are words for it now because back then it was just dressing up like your favorite character.
Right.
And now there's terms for it, and you can enter cosplay groups, or I mean, they're even letting well-known cosplayers be guests in a lot of these anime conventions that I
Right.
attend.
Yeah. And those conventions have become pretty massive, right? I mean,
Oh
people
goodness,
think that the sports card and TCG communities are big. I feel like these subcultures, these communities are just as big, if not even bigger. And although they may seem or appear as niche as we call it, they really aren't. They're like really, really popular and they've really burst onto the scene, especially overseas. I feel like it's very popular across Asia, but it has become very popular stateside over the last couple of years. Is that correct?
one of my one of my favorite things about the Japanese fandom market is that if anything gains enough of a presence over here, it's all but guaranteed the Japanese fans are going to love it too. Especially with like cross country live streams, they're seeing the same shows at the same time, and I love collecting international merch just to see how they interpreted it a little differently than we would over here stateside.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really interesting how we've adapted a lot of the culture and interests and hobbies from other countries and other cultures. I think that's really, really cool. And cosplay specifically, again, it used to feel niche and underground in the US, but I feel like over the last decade, really, it's become genuinely mainstream. And you see it everywhere too, right? Like Comic-Con is absolutely massive. And then, of course, social media, TikTok, Instagram. I mean, you see people dressing up as different characters on Halloween that are involved or a part of these different communities. Even like brand campaigns and professional photo shoots, right? What started as a
Mhm.
tight knit subculture tied to anime and gaming conventions has evolved into this widely accepted form of self expression, creativity, and identity building. And for a lot of people, it's no longer just dressing up, it's storytelling, it's art, it's performance, and it's community all wrapped into one. So I think that's really, really cool. And I love that You know, we have members from other sort of sectors, other walks of life beyond just the hobby, the sports card hobby, that you've learned a little bit about over the last couple of months by joining our meetings and being immersed in our community. But it goes to show that Collectors MD encompasses the entire world of collecting, and we accept any and everyone, regardless of who they are, where they're from, what they collect, you know, where they are in their recovery journey. So it's a beautiful thing. And again, I think this episode will shed a lot of light on a lot of these different topics and conversations we've been having in meetings that I think a lot of people will be able to relate to. So with that, we're going to segue over to our first segment, which is the shift and when collecting crossed the line. So let's start at the moment where something inside you changed. Not just the beginning of fandom, but the moment you realized this wasn't just enthusiasm, it was something heavier. Can you walk us through that realization and what made you think this might not be healthy anymore?
It's interesting because I've actually done this twice now. There was an earlier period where I tried collecting everything of a certain Pokemon, or they're called completionist collectors, where every bit of merch out there for the specific Pokemon you got to have or your collection is not complete. And I've seen a lot of people take this route with specific characters. If you have a character you love that's not as highly merchandised, it can creep along in the background for much longer. But if you have something where, oh, everybody knows this character, like you get like a legendary Pokemon, which was one of them that I was into, the poster boys, you're talking hundreds of thousands of items. And
It's crazy.
the compulsion to get all the muse was just so overwhelming that eventually I had to sit down and say, I can't do this anymore. This is making me crazy.
Right.
And I was just mad all the time because everybody was stealing my stuff from those auctions. And I would have nervous breakdowns when I missed an item because how do I know I'm never going to get that again? What was interesting was I finally recognized in the past year or so that I was doing a very similar dance to what I do when I recover from an addiction and then hop addictions without noticing. Because the series that I'm very much into nowadays, it's a very dark comedy animated musical called Has Been Hotel. It's all about a rehab clinic run by the daughter of the devil, who she tries to rehabilitate sinners to go back to heaven, and nobody's sure if it works or not. It has stunningly creative people among the fandom ranks there, and everybody's very tight knit because you have so many Venn diagrams coming together. You have the theater kid community, you have the LGBTQ community, which is there's kind of an overlap there to begin with.
Mhm.
But there's also fans of adult animation. It reaches out to a lot of people, and I've been having a ball seeing all the people in this ecosystem interact with each other and
Mm.
create more things that have to do with this sandbox of a show.
Yeah, so there's a
Um,
lot of crossover. That's really interesting.
yes, yes. Especially when it's gotten so popular in the past year or so, I want to say. They've just come out with season 2
Mhm.
that finished up just last week. And already it's mind blowing how quick the fans are because they are so passionate. They are so all in that it's not uncommon anymore to see people cosplaying characters that literally aired yesterday
Right.
and people making merch of it with their own money.
Yeah. That's super interesting. You brought up something that I think really feeds into the cycle and reasons why people become so hooked. And I think it's because industries have really figured out that TCGs, especially like Pokemon, aren't just games anymore. They're full-blown lifestyle ecosystems, right? What started
Mhm.
as trading cards has expanded into toys and plushies and apparel and video games and collectibles, home decor, collaborations, limited edition drops, and even themed food and pop-up experiences, right? Every
Oh yeah.
character, every set, and every storyline becomes an opportunity to create another product, another must-have, another emotional
Hmm.
trigger tied to things like nostalgia and fandom. And
And I'm
Pokemon is the
seeing
perfect example. right? It's not just about the cards, it's about monetizing the entire emotional connection that people have to this universe, from the exclusive merch to the premium box sets to crossover partnerships with major brands. The model is designed to keep fans constantly consuming across all of these different touch points. An item becomes the gateway, but the real profit lives in turning passion into this constant purchasing behavior, right?
It's very easy to slip into. I will say, speaking of international fans, they just had a pop-up shop open. There's like a maid and butler cafe of the Has Been Hotel characters over in Japan now. You have to you have to win a lottery literally to be able to get in. And then there's so many blind box items that you can only get if you go to that one cafe. That was kind of the moment when I realized I was getting in too deep again.
Hmm.
Was just a little while ago, where people were losing their minds trying to figure out, how am I going to get all this exclusive merch from overseas? And especially when tariffs are coming up left and right,
Right,
there were fan merch artists who were like, I can't keep going because the tariffs are too high.
right,
and and uh, and people were kind of collapsing in on themselves trying to get a completionist collection for even, background characters of the show.
right. Yeah, it's just becoming increasingly overwhelming. And again, these manufacturers, industries, they know what they're doing. They're pulling our heartstrings. They've got us basically eating out of the palms of their hands. They know what hooks us, and they're capitalizing on that any way they can. And then they're watching these people just spiral out of control, and there's no sense of support or accountability, or what we're doing is really exploitative in a lot of ways. So what we're seeing across a lot of these different subcultures that you're talking about, there's so many synergies and parallels to the sports card hobby. I mean, it's not like sort of reinventing the wheel. This isn't rocket science. This is just a tactic that marketers and industry experts have utilized for a very, very long time. But because of the nature of social media and technology and just the direction a lot of these industries are headed in, it has just gotten out of control and people are losing themselves. And so you've shared that vulnerability about things like requesting bans from certain spaces, knowing that being there was feeding something unsafe, right? Like we call
Oh,
that within gambling addiction self-exclusion. And that doesn't exist within the hobby. It exists within the traditional gambling space, but you can't self-exclude or take a cool off period or anything like that within other sort of adjacent verticals. So that's a massive step that you proactively reached out to these platforms and said, I need a break, like ban me. Or you reached out to the mods and said, remove me from this server, from this forum. So what was happening internally when you made that decision?
I wasn't sure how folks were going to handle it, to be honest, because everybody there has been just as friendly as can be, and they want the best for you. And current and former addicts that watch the show, one of the characters is full on a gambling addict. Another one is a sex worker with a drug addiction that comes up along the show. People are very vulnerable about which characters they see themselves in, but that just means that it hurts more to realize this isn't actually helping me anymore. This is not me trying to connect with the character. It's being sold stuff over and over and over again. It was hard to do, especially in the Has Been Hotel space, because, like I said, there are so many fantastically creative people out there that are making their own merch and selling it, that in a lot of spaces that I was in these forums with, if I was self-excluding myself from the community, I was basically saying goodbye to all my friends in the
Right.
fandom, which
And
was rough. But I was so happy to realize, after I asked to be banned on purpose, the outpouring of support that I heard from the mods, and saying, I had some concerns just looking at some posts and all the fire sales you were doing, and so glad that you're getting help with this. In fact, there's a link to Collectors MD that I gave people in a few of those forums upon my release, I guess.
yeah, well, Thank you so much for that. Your support has
Oh
been
yeah.
incredible. And I know you've also posted the flyers some places, or you were planning to, and that's
Hmm.
amazing. I mean, Collectors MD has become an incredible community that I'm so grateful to not just be leading, but to be a part of. So getting the word out there, spreading awareness proactively, like that is our duty as collectors, as individuals who want a safe, healthy, and sustainable future for whatever we're immersed in, whatever subculture or community we're involved in. And so that goes a really, really long way.
I was so relieved to realize that Collectors MD exists because I was welcomed with such open arms there, even though I was kind of a different species at first coming in. I mean, I'm very out loud proud, whatever you want to call it, in a lot of areas. And that has backfired against me in groups in the past where they're just sort of like, I don't know about this one. But I found none of that in Collectors MD. I was told I belonged there, that they were here to help me and help me find my own recovery path. It was no judgment. I love that you all exist.
Well, we really appreciate you saying that, Hyde. What you just said is exactly why we exist. We want to meet any and everybody wherever they are in their journey, any walk of life, any background, culture, religion, denomination. It doesn't matter who you are, what you look like. That's sort of arbitrary to it all. We just care about the health, the safety, and the sanity of the people within our community. There's no judgment. And you know, for those listening, Hyde isn't just talking about me. They're talking about everybody that is involved in this community. Folks like
Absolutely.
Brandon and Travis and Sean and other members that have just been so positive and have reinforced the mantra that we spread every single day. We've really built a beautiful foundation of people that join our meetings every single week, are super supportive. They support one another. They recognize that this isn't a leader movement, this is a peer support movement, meaning that we are all on the same playing field, including myself. I'm a recovering addict. I've embraced that it's a lifelong commitment, and I'm doing my duty as part of the 12-step program in Gamblers Anonymous, which, you know, 12-step touches on how important it is to carry the message forward and to help other people who are struggling with what you went through a really hard time with. And so that's really, really important. And again, I appreciate you, Hyde, for highlighting that. And you know, community is so important to so many people. So you brought up a really, really good point before. A lot of people are apprehensive when they are sort of toying with the idea of pausing or stepping away or self-excluding, whatever you want to call it, right? And that's because there's that sense of community and friendships and relationships that you've built that you might be sacrificing by walking away. But what folks don't understand is that you could still have that sense of community without having to overextend yourself. This isn't even something I planned for. It just sort of happened organically, but we have an incredible community right here at Collectors MD. And we preach and we embody a lot of these principles and values that we talk about every day, right? Whether it be abstinence or collecting with intention. These are folks that want to become the best versions of themselves, right? And a lot of that happens through a healing process. And we can't heal alone. It can't happen in isolation. We have to heal in group. We have to help each other. And so that's what Collectors MD has become. And it's what we're expanding upon that foundation, building out the fundamental core principles that are needed in order to continue to spread this message and keep it rooted in everything that we started with. As we grow and as we become more mainstream, I guess you could call it, we don't want to become like sellouts, so to speak, and just change the way we do things or the way we carry our message forward. We want to be authentic and genuine and rooted in, again, the authenticity that made Collectors MD what it is in the first place. And so, again, if you feel like you are at a loss and you don't know how to exit whatever community you're involved in because it's no longer serving you, it's become unhealthy in many ways, but you're afraid of losing out on community or friends or things like that. There's a community right here where you don't have to spend a single dollar that has other people in it that will lift you up and support you no matter what you're going through.
I do have some good news on that front, just in terms of the whole difference between creating and acquiring
Hmm.
somebody's creativity is that I've been like sparkling about it all day, but as of literally yesterday, I started writing again, and
Amazing.
it was not original script or anything. It was for the Has Been Hotel fandom, but the thing of it is, it took me 2 years to want to write again. And I really do think that if I hadn't been chewing on that sort of a pacifier of acquiring stuff and not making anything for the community, maybe I would have started writing quicker. I don't want to, you know, Monday morning quarterback on anything, but
Yeah, you can become sidetracked and distracted really easily by a lot of the things that we're talking about and kind of lose sight of what you truly love or you're passionate about. And writing is such an important one because it can be therapeutic, it can be cathartic, and it can really help you reflect on yourself and what's important to you, prioritize, and I've learned that through Collectors MD because of the daily reflections. I write one every single day. We've had other members from the community contribute to make sure that we haven't missed a day since we launched on March 25th of this year. So it's been a project of mine that I'm really proud of. And every time I write one, which is almost every day, with the exception of when other folks contribute, it's a soothing feeling almost. It feels like I'm blowing a lot of steam. I'm sort of getting a lot off my chest and taking personal inventory and doing things that I need to do in my recovery. And so, given that you're writing again, Hyde, we would love to have you contribute to a daily reflection whenever you're ready.
I just might have to.
Amazing.
No promises as to a date, but
Yeah.
it would
No,
be
no
really exciting
pressure
to
as
have that
always.
dive in too.
Yeah, you can start it whenever you want. Whenever you're ready, we'll be ready for you. And you just work on it a little bit at a time. And then once you feel like it's in a good place, you can work with me and we'll edit it and make it fit our format. And we'll get it live on the website and you can be a part of volume one, which my plan is after 365 days of publishing a daily reflection is to publish volume one of the daily reflection and sort of use that as like the foundation of what Collectors MD was built upon, not to sell or to make money off of or anything like that. If anything, it would probably just be like a couple copies and then maybe provide our community members with the opportunity to get a copy if it's like not too expensive. But I just think it would be a really cool component of everything that we've been building and something I and the rest of the community would be really proud of. And we've had a lot of contributors. So again, it's not just myself writing these, it's the entire Collectors MD ecosystem. And that's what makes it such a beautiful thing. So I wanted to ask you one more question pertaining to that first segment. And so when you stepped away after requesting those bands and you were feeling that silence and that sort of isolation temporarily, really, because you ultimately
Mhm.
found Collectors MD and you re-immersed yourself in other ways and you had that sort of outpouring of folks reaching out to see that you were okay. But there was that short, dull moment right afterwards, I'm sure, where you just felt like that eerie silence. What did that feel like to you?
It was so weird. There's a trope in horror video games where it's just like nothing is scarier, where if you just hear silence, then your brain kind of fits in like, oh, what could be behind that corner? What could be behind? And your brain kind of makes up something even scarier. For the first few days after leaving all my groups, it was just absolute no notifications for auctions, no pings from my discords. It was just kind of like from a battlefield. It was just like there's nothing. And I had to make sure that I wasn't what I remember being called white knuckling it, where I had to, I had some books that I wanted to read. I'll read those books. Or I can set a timer and try to draw again for an hour or so. Just something to keep it out of the forefront of my mind, because otherwise it's like, well, don't think about pink kangaroos. What are you going to think about for the next
Right.
few hours?
Of course. Yeah, that's really interesting. It reminds me of the sentiment or like the quote that the two scariest things in the universe is that we're either alone or that we're not alone, right?
Yeah.
And like the idea of just like indefinite silence around us when you really think about the size and scope of the universe. I mean, just the solar system and the galaxy alone. I mean, we're just a speck of sand in this great, giant, overwhelming amount of space. And that scares the heck out of me when I really start to think about it. So yeah, I mean, human beings aren't naturally supposed to just sit alone in isolation and be
Mhm.
surrounded by quiet. Like we are by nature the types of beings that interact with one another.
I love
We
that
need to
about
be
Collectors
stimulated to
MD
some extent.
is that there's a Discord where you can, if you're having trouble, you can sound the signal and somebody gets back to you. It's just like, hey, you need a call.
Yeah.
Like when I was struggling with I have gone to a couple of conventions since quitting the overall game. But even when I went there, people were offering like, hey, if you need to call me, if you get tempted out there in Artist Alley, you know where to find me.
Right.
And just having that opportunity to reach out is so much better than just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm broken, I can't do this by myself. It's kind of funny, there's a parallel to this in the Has Been Hotel show where there's a character who's in hell for gambling and there's another one in hell for, you're pretty sure, because he's like a gay sex worker with a drug addiction. But the sex worker, or Angel Dust, got him on my shirt, is despairing that it's like, this is so rock bottom and nobody understands what it's like. He has this big crash out, complains to the gambler, and the gambler responds because this is a musical by breaking into song. And it's such an uplifting song, surprisingly, because it's called Loser Baby. And it's just like, you're a loser. You're a loser just like me. And they bond over it. And that's what starts to get Angel going towards like opening up to the other characters eventually.
Yeah, you brought up one other thing that I want to touch on. We want to create as many touch points as we possibly can for our community members, right? We don't want to just be a weekly peer support meeting like GA or AA or NA, and you join, you show up anonymously, you share, and then you leave. Like we want to be able to provide our community members with as many outlets as we can possibly give them so that they can have that sort of olive branch as needed. If you're feeling that sense of isolation, you reach out on our Discord. You want to reach out to another member on Facebook or Instagram, you could post on the Collectors MD page and somebody will get back to you. Like that's what it's all about. Peer support is just so important and it's so powerful. And again, we've really cemented this incredible foundation of a community that we're building. And I know it's only going to grow from here. So we're super grateful for our first members because we're going to be here for the long haul and a lot of people need help. So that's what we're here to do. So with that, we're going to transition over to our next segment, which is withdrawal, triggers, and living with the urge. So you've spoken about how stepping away didn't magically remove the urge. In fact, it made you more aware of it.
Very
What did
much.
those first moments of distance and withdrawal look like emotionally and physically for you?
It was interesting for me in particular because I have so many elements of Angel's story in my own backstory that people had been calling me the IRL Angel Dust. And I started taking that and like making these little buttons that I would literally like give away at conventions, and it would say along the top, there is so much more to you than your pain and you were never alone. And people would like burst into tears, asking to hug me, thanking me for that. And I said, this is something that people need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing of it was like there's a lot of people who recognize addiction from the course of like drugs or alcohol, and there's kind of a pause after you say and collecting, but it's still like there's going to be the pull, there's going to be that thing where passion gets subsumed by needing stuff, and it's the same kind of, I need a distraction to cope with this. It's very familiar. Like you said, I am trying to become my favorite version of myself. So in the past, I've I've been on the path of recovery from drugs and alcohol. I'm sober 9.5 years from booze now and counting.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's a
you.
major accomplishment.
I had to learn to love myself, and that only took me a few decades.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's a
um,
lifelong commitment though. And once
mhm.
you've crossed that threshold and you've sort of surrendered and accepted that your life has become unmanageable with whatever the vice is, and you sort of turn yourself over to the road to recovery,
Yeah,
it
whatever that
it
looks like. It
becomes
doesn't have to involve a higher power. That's another reason that this was on my ooh kind of list.
right, right. We're not trying to direct anybody
It's not boilerplate.
spiritually or religiously. But you brought up a good point. Like, even though things like collecting and gambling don't create this chemical dependency like alcohol or drugs, they can still hijack the brain in almost the same exact way. The pull comes from the dopamine reward system, the same circuitry involved in substance abuse. Every hit, win, pull, purchase, rare find delivers this rush of anticipation, this relief, this excitement, which the brain just quickly learns to crave and chase again. And over time, the behavior stops being about enjoyment and becomes about regulation, like numbing the stress and escaping emotions or momentarily just feeling like you're in control. The same way substances and alcohol have that effect, right? The person
Yeah.
needs more intensity,
Well,
more
I can piggyback
frequency.
off of that.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's true.
Yeah, there was one item in particular where I thought, okay, this is going to be the last item to my collection, which is, all the other recovery folks are going like when they hear that.
Mhm.
But there was one thing in particular where I had no money after selling off the rest of my collectibles that would move on Facebook Marketplace and the like. But I had come across this find that I knew as soon as I let it out of my grasp, I was never going to see one of these again. There was an actual art print from the self-published account of the creator of Has Been Hotel from like 2016, like way before there was even an animated pilot ready for the show. But I saw that, and it's of angel dust, slightly unrecognizable in that form. But I said, I need that. I need that. And I will do anything for it. And I literally was out in the parking lot of one of my old client hotspots, like waiting to go in and see if any of my those clients were still alive and hanging out there, because I just needed it so bad. And I'm so glad that I never broke that promise to myself that I wouldn't go back to doing that again, because it's not safe. And frankly, I love myself too much for going back to that. Not that there's, I mean, I work as I work in kink as my day job, but it's the safety that I would be tossing away from that, that it's just like I can't. And even though I had to end up like going into debt to try and pay off for this print, I'm very glad I have the print, but there's always going to be that tinge there where it's just like you can't do that to yourself anymore.
Yeah.
This is your moment of, do I want to get rehabilitated or not,
Yeah.
whether it's
Yeah.
drugs or stuff.
100%. Yeah, I mean, the cycle that we're talking about, again, it feels so familiar to addiction. The compulsion, the escalation, the shame, the secrecy, even withdrawal symptoms show up. And you don't ever have to put a substance into your body. So, the hook isn't chemical, it's neurological and emotional, but the grip can feel just as powerful and just as overwhelming.
After I saw Has Been Hotel episode 4 for the first time, which if anybody looks it up, it's a lot. It was so mark for mark like things in my own past that I ended up having this mental breakdown of just flashbacks for 2 weeks. But I'm so glad that I got through it and still tried reaching out to the community. So glad I did that. And just like I am so glad that when I quit collecting, there was like a 2 or 3 week dopamine total crash.
Hmm.
And it was just like I was outlines and there was just no color inside, just black and white.
Yeah.
So worth it.
It can
being
really
on the
have that
other side.
effect, yeah, and it's something that you have to build towards, and it's not gonna be easy in the beginning, but as you take it one day at a time, it does get easier, but the work
Yeah.
never stops. So, would you feel comfortable, Hyde, talking a little bit about your recent experience at the convention, being surrounded by things like nostalgia, temptation, muscle memory behaviors? And if so, how did that moment challenge your growth? And what did you learn about yourself in that moment?
Well, I will preface this with saying I do have a head injury that I got a few years ago. So some of the behavior involved does not match up with how you would logically respond to something.
Okay.
But I had just gotten the opportunity in Michigan to speak with some of the voice actors who are on Has Been Hotel and have
Mhm.
been just gems of people, just these beacons to the fandom of inspiration. And I got to meet the one that I had been writing semi regularly. I would hand him letters when I would show up at these conventions.
Right.
And I had to finally stop and say, okay, are you reading any of these? Like, do you keep any? Or, and the first thing that he said was, well, actually, I don't, well, more like I can't keep anything.
Right.
And my brain didn't remember the rest of what he said until late into that night.
Right. It
Uh,
just hit you like a ton of bricks.
yep. And eventually he followed up by saying, no, no, it's that I wrote such good letters. He actually would take photos of the letter to kind of keep it that way. Realistically speaking, like these actors are, he's in a one bedroom studio apartment. If they kept everything that fans give them, they would be buried in it. And I can remember nodding my head as the rest of it kind of crept into my memory. But with that shock, as soon as I got done with talking with him, I just stalked off, and my partner's trailing behind me, wondering what the heck we said to each other. But I started darting around the artist alley, and it's just like I want that, and like starting to ask my partner, even though I had not bought anything that entire convention, which is a huge win for me. I started saying, "Can you buy me this?" I'm so glad that he's been paying attention when I tell him what I learned at Collectors MD, because he
Mhm.
was saying, "Hang on a sec, let's take a moment, remember to breathe." And you just went through a lot back there. I don't know what you said, but are you sure you're not just chasing another dopamine hit here? And I had to just let go of that tension in my gut and say, I totally am. That's not who I want to be. Instead of buying, merchandise of this character, I could actually like become this version of myself that I wanted to be instead of a static cartoon character.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing that your partner had the wherewithal to sort of take a moment to pause and help you reconsider or make sure that you are staying within your own personal boundaries and means, and that's what it's all
Totally.
about. It's about having that accountability partner that can help you sort of navigate through a lot of these temptations and urges that will pop up, especially at a convention like that. But what you described as far as speaking with somebody that you really looked up to, it reminds me of like a scene in a movie or a TV show when the person hears something and the camera sort of zooms in on their face and everything around them just blurs, and
You just hear
you
your
can't
own
really,
heartbeat.
it's like all you hear is like distortion, and yeah, the person can only hear the voices in their own head. That seems to be what you experience, which is, it's a very real thing. And so,
Yeah.
I think it's amazing that you were able to power through that and sort of reflect on it and make peace with it a little bit. I know
Yeah.
something like that can be really, really difficult to digest, especially when you're sort of playing the moment over and over in your head leading up to it. And then it just
Yeah.
doesn't really go according to plan or how you expected. And it can just be really, really deflating. So,
Yeah, well, especially considering like how kind an answer that ended up being that I
yeah,
just wasn't in the headspace for right at that moment yet.
right, right. So you weren't really
Um,
able to fully digest.
yeah, and I find if you invest that much of yourself and your time and your energy into loving something that hard, it's vulnerable. It hits you in the gut unprotected if it comes at you like that.
Absolutely.
I'm just really glad that that I have the community there, because the community was like, oh, they got to go to Michigan, awesome, how'd it go? And I
Yeah.
was just like, give me a minute.
Need a moment.
Yeah, there was one person, I love this person so much. They own a game store called Legacy Games. Little shout out to Sleepy there, where they actually like knew that I was on a self-exclusion diet lately, and like I was telling them about the con as they're unpacking Has Been Hotel merch, and they just stopped and looked up and said, "Oh my gosh, is this actually okay that I'm doing this?" Like that level of caring. I love that I found that from so many people in the community, both Collectors MD and the Has Been Hotel fandom.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Again, support is everything, and I'm glad you were able to sort of find that. We're going to transition over to our next segment, which is identity, community, and grief. And so for many collectors, the hardest part isn't just spending, it's the identity attached to it, right? We unpack that a little bit as far as our attachments to community and things like that. So who were you inside fandom, and who did it feel like you were losing when you stepped back?
Um, I mean, just to specify, the IRL Angel Dusts Club, I was known for handing out those buttons. Like people all over the country would end up with them, and I'd have a little frequently asked questions card that I attached with it eventually, just to let folks know, like, hey, you don't have to wear this. Keep yourself safe if you don't want questions about it,
Hmm.
and you don't have to tell me what you and Angel have in common because you don't owe anyone your backstory.
Sure.
I was sort of like a fandom elder, because most of the folks that watch the show are like 20s, sometimes 30s. There's not too many folks pushing 50 that are hanging around. And it's just really important to me that there's somebody who's gone ahead of everybody else and said, yes, it's still awesome here. Please keep existing because this might happen to you. You might actually learn to love yourself eventually. Like, please keep trying.
Right. You became incredibly known within these communities. So, how did things like visibility, acceptance, and expectation complicate your journey?
Expectation, it's interesting when you see so much of yourself in a character that is still hasn't learned to love themselves yet. And so many people identify with that version of the character where, like, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but when season 2 ended, that character ended up in a situation where it's like, I knew that was coming from 20 years ago, and everybody else was crashing out saying, how could this happen? And I'm just like, oh, honey, yeah, I think a sense of self-improvement is good. Don't assume that like anybody is grading you other than whoever's in your head doing it.
Right.
But it's been nice being the person that people can come to and unload at your doorstep, and keeping up healthy boundaries, of course. That's a very recent thing that I'm learning.
You've touched on something I think is really powerful, the idea of grieving a version of yourself. So, what does that experience feel like, and how did you even begin to process the loss of someone you once were?
Oh gosh, as a member of the trans community, I actually feel like, and this is not like, this isn't that everybody believes this, but I do believe that people are doing themselves a disservice when they eradicate who they were told they were supposed to be,
Hmm.
like that version of themselves. Because a lot of people do is just sort of like, I have always been this, I have never been anything else. And it's just like, but you learn certain things from doing that. Like that's still part of you. It may have been like inherently traumatic, but you do learn about yourself from examining all these scattered parts that you don't fit anymore.
Yeah. Well said. I mean, it's absolutely the case. And fortunately, I think society as a whole has adapted and has been more accepting and forthcoming with people and their identities and different cultures. And we want to make sure that we're welcoming any and everyone, regardless of who they are and where they come from.
Yeah,
That's what it comes down to. And
it
I'm
meant
really
so
glad that
much.
you had the courage and the bravery to be able to be your true self and not sort of just fall in line with how society depicts you or expects you to be. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to do something like that. And,
Thank you.
um, but not just do it, Hyde, but actively talk about it in these different open forums and settings and conversations where you're carrying this message forward and giving other people the courage to do something that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have been able to, right?
That's my
You're leading
jam.
by example.
Yeah, that is kind of my jam, where if there's somebody that I can help feel less alone, I'm an open book. And I know that I do kind of fall into the margins of a lot of experiences, so it's more worth it to me to get the word out there because I know so many people are figuring they're the only ones thinking this, and it's not true. There are people who will get you, and they can be hard to find, but oh my gosh, when you find them, the view from where I'm at is just like nothing else. It has all been worth it. I
Yeah.
would not change a thing from what all I've learned.
Yeah. Can't have regrets. I mean, I say the same thing about a lot of the things that I've gone through personally, where I made a lot of really bad decisions and I have my transgressions and those feelings of regret where I wish I did things differently. But at the same time, if I did anything differently, then I don't know if I'd be here today helping other people,
Oh yeah.
building this community, building this movement that is helping so many other people. I'm 36 years old and I was in advertising and marketing for about 13 years before I launched Collectors MD, and it's the first time in my life where I actually feel fulfilled, like I'm actually making an impact somewhere, and it's really empowering.
If I could jump in there, I think that's one thing that's so hard to learn, but vital to recognize is that you're not going to be able to save everybody, but you try to save the one in front of you where you
Right.
can.
Right.
And it's just sort of like that tale of the kid who's throwing starfish into the sea that have beached, and there's this old guy coming by and it's just like, you're not going to save all of them, what are you even doing?
Yeah.
And kid picks one up, plunks it in the sea, and says, well, I made a difference to that one, didn't I? That's how you got to frame it. The funny thing is, it's so important to learn how to forgive yourself too, because I do believe that most people inherently want to help others. It's just that shame and fear of judgment, like it ends up clouding people for years and years deep. But learning how to forgive yourself, the version of myself that I'm actually most grateful for in my life is 2004 me. Basically, this kid named no, they're not going to hand out names like candy in the trans community, but I don't mind people knowing that Jonathan was sitting stuck in his bedroom for an entire year and just not having any reason to stick around that he knew of yet. I would stay in my bedroom and just know that if I went out there and tried talking with people, everybody would just know I was a loser and start laughing at me. But I existed and I kept existing. And sometimes, like, whole years can be bridges to things that don't suck as bad. So, like, out of everybody that I've been, 2004 me, I got to give him a high five because it's like he had no reason or map or compass to stick around, and he did anyway. And I would not be the person that I am today without him being there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an important perspective because so many people just get caught up in their past. They dwell, they spend all of this invested energy on how we could have done things differently. But the only thing we can control is the present and the future.
Yep.
And so if we just stay stuck in the past, it's not going to serve us any good in the grand scheme of things. So rather than dwelling, take an opportunity to look at the bright side, look at the silver lining of these sort of situations where,
Now you know a way that doesn't work.
right, you live and you learn. That's life. That's just life in general.
And
But
you work towards their favorite version of yourself.
yeah,
Or at least I have.
yeah. With that, we'll transition over to our next segment, which is rebuilding intention and healthy boundaries. So let's talk about healing, not perfection, but intention, which is a word we use a lot. So, what does intentional collecting and participation look like for you now?
I love that you asked this because there's actually a quote that I heard from Guillermo del Toro when he had part of his collection on display at a local art gallery here in Minnesota a few years back, where I actually got to have a question answered by him that I was just asking, do you have any advice for your fellow collectors? And he said back, make sure that everything you collect has a story that you want to tell, because otherwise, what are you doing here? I went home that night and just realized all the things that I had around me on my shelves that
Hmm.
I didn't remember how I got,
Yep.
that it was just another number to fill in the box to block out that rectangle. And it was just like, why am I keeping so much of this stuff? And that's when I really started rehoming a lot of the things where I love the fact that it exists. That doesn't mean I need to keep it on my shelf. And it is nice to know that there are so many other fans that would give it a loving home, especially for the rarer stuff.
Yeah, one person does not need that much stuff, right? Like I learned that through my sneaker collecting days, where when I
Mm,
was in my mid to late 20s, I had over 500 pairs of sneakers in my collection. And I'd look at these walls of sneakers that I created, and they were all in drop run containers that you buy at the container store. So they're these like clear
mhm.
plastic containers. You could see a few of them behind me. My screen's a little blurred, but you could see them all and visualize your collection. And every time I bought a new pair of sneakers, I was so excited to put them in a drop front and be able to put all the Jordan ones together and Air Force ones together and whatever. And it just got to a point where I was just buying just for the sake of buying. Like there was no
Yep,
true reason behind it. There was no storytelling or
I hit that hurdle
anything
too.
sentimental. I was just buying. And like I realized after time, and even with the cards, when I got really heavy into the sports card collecting, the piles would just build up. And I guess in the back of my mind, I knew I had that card, but like I didn't think about it. It didn't like really own any real estate in my brain. And so like, why did I spend $500 on that card?
Yep.
And to your
That
point,
was
just
the
scratching that itch,
origin.
just to like, because that one night where like I was just feeling low and saw somebody hit that card in a break that I could have joined or that I was a part of where I missed, I felt like I needed it in that moment and I bought it. And then a week later it came and I stashed it away and I totally forgot about it.
And
That's
it went
why
dormant. Yep.
collecting with intention is so important. It's just,
Especially with the memory issues that are starting to crop up since I've had the head injury, is
yeah,
that I don't want something to just come in the mail and then I stick it in a box and I don't know I have it anymore.
yeah,
Right now, all the things that I have on display, that's what I have. I
yeah,
have numerous empty tubs down in my basement, and everything is just like I am surrounded by beautiful things in my nerd cave right now.
right.
Everything has a story, and it's just like best of hits
I
from
love that.
every direction.
And that's what collecting should be, right? It should be a curated reflection of you. It doesn't
I
have to
agree.
be this overwhelming monstrosity of a mountain of sneakers or toys or cards or any of that, right? It just has
And
to
we got that
serve
already.
you.
That's called House on the Rock. Just stuff for the sake of more stuff.
I'll quickly share my screen here because there was a post that I created a couple months ago on Instagram, and it's just a picture of sneakers stacked neatly on these shelves, and it's collect with clarity, not chaos, right? Like this seems like a lot of sneakers, but in the grand scheme of things, compared to like a lot of the sneaker heads in this space, it's really not that much. And
Yeah.
so, we say, don't drown in the noise. Find your focus.
I
It's
loved
just
that
it's so
post you made
important.
about dialing down what you figure out you need to pay attention to.
Yeah, the daily reflection.
Yeah, that thing about because you listed off some examples, and it's just sort of like, okay, part of me deals like that. Like the more excited I am about something, the harder it is to not buy something.
Yeah,
And then there's the other part of me that's like, oh, but I just want to get away, and I got to keep focused on like, am I trying to drown out something else, or do I actually want this thing?
yeah, this one, right?
Yeah, I loved that one.
Yeah, turning down the volume is so important. Yeah. The moment we turn the external volume down, the chaos fades and the truth we've been missing finally becomes audible. So true and so important. So if you'd like to check this out, just go to collectorsmd.com/daily reflection. And this one was from November 19th. So this was, I think, 5 days ago.
Fairly
It's,
recent.
it's really, really important to make sure that you're just following the right path, following your journey. You don't have to,
Yeah.
take this as like Bible, like you have to do this in order to live in a state of bliss or clarity, whatever you want to call it. But these are just pointers. These are tips that have
Oh
helped a
yeah.
lot of people in our community sort
That
of.
that is another thing too to keep in mind. It's just like there's no final boss.
Right,
Like you're gonna keep dealing with things as life comes your way. It's just learning to know yourself enough to figure out that you're falling into old patterns easier and quicker,
right.
and then you find your own way. I have myself made every mistake on some of the paths that I've followed, and I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah,
Then I can tell the younger ones in the community, it's just like, be the gallant to my goofus, make better mistakes than I did.
yeah, yeah. Well said. You've mentioned, and we've already touched on this today, but your partner obviously is very supportive, and having somebody that holds you accountable is huge. So how has that
Mhm.
shifted your relationship with money and self-trust? And what does safety look like or feel like for you now?
There's an interesting balancing act you got to go to when it comes to acknowledging when you have spending issues. And that is that the spending issue might have been like a control factor that you needed back when you started spending like that. That's one thing that I am now aware of. And you got to start by like acknowledging that a thing exists. But I know that when I was a kid, even with my earliest cartoon merch collections, I needed everything to be this precise one that I wanted, and I needed it to be in pristine condition because I was raised as a concert oboist from a very young age, and there wasn't a lot of options for how I spent my days. I was always going back and forth, my parents driving me to one practice or another. I'm not going to say it was a bad decision because I was playing the Kennedy Center in middle school. Like it was a big deal, but it was just like I needed that sense of control so that like I had some, even if it was just, well, I got this toy instead of those.
Right. Accountability is so important. And when you have people that are looking out for your best interest, whether it be a parent, whether it be a partner, whether it be just a friend or somebody in your peer support group, having that accountability buddy can really make or break. It can really
Yeah.
help shift you from that state of compulsion where like you're just in the moment and you can't control that urge to, hey, let's reassess why we're here, what we're doing. Let's think about all of the work we've put in with recovery and the weekly meetings and the self inventory and all those things, and let's reconsider,
I will
and
say
sometimes
that
we can't do it alone. We need support.
I will say it's a lot easier sometimes in the wording to figure out what's going to work and what's not, because when you know that the control is like trying to get back any semblance of control from like way back when,
Hmm.
then wording it as like you can't tell me like, oh, you can't spend this, you've spent too much already, then I'm immediately going to just react and push back and say, no, I'm not, like I'm a
Right.
kid again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you outline the positive qualities of what you'll get if you hold off, then it's like, well, hey, you could earn this thing that you want even more just by holding off for right now. And then
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
you know,
We we
the
call
dog wants
that
to.
we call that sort of tactic in recovery and gambling, traditional gambling addiction, um, harm reduction through
Mhm.
positive reinforcement, right?
Yeah.
Which is really, really important, because to your point, if you just tell somebody to stop, like a kid, like you said, their knee jerk reaction is to continue, right?
Yeah.
And
And that's one
so,
thing that I'm continually battling against is just like, you can't take my money away. That's my money. You can't tell me to stop. And everything around me is just saying it would be better if you did, though.
The reason why that happens is because it creates those emotions: anger,
Hmm.
frustration, confusion, overexcitement.
Hmm.
And those are the sort of emotions that end up triggering a lot of these behaviors. On the other side of the coin, the folks that are listening that maybe have an addict in their life, or somebody that might be going or crossing the line, you have to sort of be sensitive to that. You have to sort of tread lightly in a lot of ways to make sure that you're finessing it in a way that isn't going to push them even further into the ether. We want to make sure that we're reeling them in strategically in a way. So, over the last few months, Hyde, you've shown up consistently in both our Collectors MD and Unbox meetings. So, how have those spaces helped you feel safer in community and begin rebuilding some of those core foundations you've been working through?
Well, one thing that it's helped with is it's a lot easier to distill my situation down to like an elevator pitch now, because the more you explain your situation to somebody that literally doesn't know you from Adam, you get better at summarizing. And like I'm a writer, like I've got a couple books out, and I can get really rambly and give walls of text if the case calls for it, or if somebody doesn't point it out. But just the idea that, folks don't have all day, that you have this meeting and you can address these issues, but it helps if you make them quicker, but still wanting to get the basics of what you want to address. The repetition of these people don't know me, these people don't know me has helped immensely with just kind of Reader's Digest or Spark Notes, I guess it would be now. Getting the quick version of what needs to be known to address the situation at hand.
Yeah, peer support groups like Collectors MD and Unboxed and even Gamblers Anonymous, they're vital for recovery because it removes this sense of isolation and it replaces it with understanding. And these spaces connect people who share the same lived struggles, which helps reduce shame, normalize honest conversation, and create a sense of belonging. Instead of feeling judged
Absolutely.
or fixed, individuals are able to feel seen and supported by others who truly get what they're going through. And so, recovery, like we just keep saying, it doesn't happen in isolation, it happens in community. Peer support offers things like accountability, shared language, and emotional safety, which helps people rebuild healthier relationships with things like collecting while reinforcing that they are not alone in the process.
Sounds cynical, but you're a loser just like me.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the
And
day,
then you learn.
the house always wins. And
Hmm.
once you learn that, there's a reason why these industries rake in billions of dollars every year.
Hmm.
You could start to take back some of that control. So, with that, we're going to transition over to the rapid fire round. I'm
Okay,
going to ask you a question and you're going to hit me with the first thing that comes to mind. You ready?
let's do this.
All right. When did you know something needed to change?
Oh, that's the story of my life. Every roadblock where I realized I couldn't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result again.
What surprised you most about stepping back?
The quiet that I had to fill all by myself, I thought.
A boundary you're proud of holding.
So glad I didn't go into that bar again to try and get that quick few $100.
Hmm.
It wouldn't be worth it.
One thing fandom gave you and one thing it quietly took.
Fandom gave me a sense of holding my soul out in my hands and people walking past, looking at it and picking it up and putting it back. And then every once in a grand while, those moments where somebody picks it up and looks at it and looks back at me and says, I know, right?
Hmm.
But the thing it took away was, that's a good one. There's so many things that you lose in any addiction where it's just like you give that part of yourself away, you break the rule that you said you'd follow, and you get nothing from it, just another hit.
What would you say to someone who thinks, "Oh, it's just merch. It's just toys or, it's just stuff."
It's just love, like it's just passion, it's just all
Passion,
these
yeah.
other words that have a lot of words behind them.
Yeah.
The
It's more
stuff that
the
gets you up in the morning.
It's more than just the item. One word that describes who you're becoming.
Gonna go with Hyde.
I love it. Well
Work in
said.
progress. Yeah.
Awesome. Hyde, thank you truly for the vulnerability, the honesty, and the courage you brought into this space today. Your story isn't just brave, it's necessary. To everyone listening, this episode isn't about judgment. It's about reflection, clarity, and reclaiming control in spaces that don't always encourage pause. If you've ever felt like your relationship with collecting or fandom is slipping into something heavier, know this: you're not alone, and you don't have to navigate it in silence. Collectors MD hosts free weekly peer support meetings every Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. We've also partnered with the Problem Gambling Coalition of Colorado to host additional peer support meetings called Unboxed, powered by Collectors MD, every Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. You can join these meetings, access tools, resources, and our full archive of recovery-related content at collectorsmd.com. Be sure to subscribe to the Collectors Compass across YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and all major streaming platforms. You can also explore our other shows, Behind the Breaks and Collectors MD features. Hyde, thank you again for trusting us with your story. I'm Alyx Efron. This is the Collectors Compass, reminding you to collect with intention, not compulsion. We'll see you next time.